Looking for real stories that lift you up? Welcome to Inspire and Impact, the podcast where purpose meets perseverance. This is where transformation begins and your story continues.
Welcome to Inspire and Impact podcast interviews. I'm your host, Daniel Rosenstein. The show features real conversations with thought leaders, healers, entrepreneurs, and creators who share their journeys of growth, purpose, making meaningful impact. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Majbrit Barker. Majbrit, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself to, introduce yourself to the audience?
I can tell you. My name is Majbrit Bøttger. I know it's impossible for other nations to pronounce right, and don't worry about it. And I'm a certified high performance coach, working right now with C-suite, but haven't always done that. So I've been working in the coaching business since 2012, and this has been a fun journey. So this is what I do right now. I do lectures and workshops and private coaching, group coaching, anything that can help develop other people.
Wonderful. So what inspired your journey into high performance coaching?
It began back in 12. And it began with me being a hot mess, like seriously stressed out, not work related. I actually managed to create this mess all on my own. So I found later that no is a full sentence. And that if you don't stand up for your own boundaries and values, nobody else will either. So that's basically what created this whole entire mess. And it ended out in a divorce. That was not good. Let me start by saying today we're fine. We have a really good relationship, my ex and I. And he's the father of my 3 children. So that's important. But it wasn't always like that. And I remember I was home alone with the 3 girls. At this time, they were 3, 6, and 9. And I'm going out to the kitchen to pour the cat food, dry food out for the cat. And as I pour the bag, it cracks open and there's cat food everywhere. Usually that would not create an emotional meltdown, but that was that final, the final draw. And I just crashed right there on the floor. I just fall to pieces. And the kids come running towards me, looking at me, saying, Mom, what's wrong? What's wrong? What happened? Are you hurt? And I could see the fear in their face. I can see the fear in their face, and they feel like they're not that old. They have no idea what to do. They're freaking out. And I'm at that moment exactly, I'm deciding that this is enough. This cannot keep going because it's hurting my children. So that was my moment of truth where I knew I had to take action. So I decided to take action. And now comes freaking out part 2. Because I realized something needed to happen. And for the first time in my life, I had no clue what to do. I've never been in a situation like this before. Usually I can always find a way out of situations. I'm really good at being solution-oriented and result-focused. But this time I wasn't. I was blank, and that was really scary to me. And then, by some fortune, look, I don't know, I ran into a really high-profile coach. His name is Majbrit Barker. And I met him in Copenhagen. He's from the US. But I met him in Copenhagen. Unreal, right? And that was the kickstart of everything that's happened ever since. So he got me into a program. That was an online program. And you got this 12 modules, and one module was released every week. So it was stripped out. And I went back to my hotel after meeting him and opening up this program, going through the first module straight away, so ready to move to the next. I was like, I have to wait a week. That's not going to happen. So I contacted the support, and by going back and forth and negotiating a little bit, I got them to finally open up the entire 12 modules so I could finish that. And I finished it within a week and a half and implemented everything. Everything he said to do, I did. And people were really surprised. Really, really surprised. Because a lot happened. So now that was before the divorce finalized. But then we got divorced, and I moved to another part of the country, and I changed my job. And all of these things happened. And even though I did everything he said in those modules, I implemented everything, I think the groundwork of it all was not in place. So on a surface level, this was working really, really well. But deeper down, there were still some unsolved issues. So I did not perform the way I used to do. I got fired from my job. Now I'm just fired, alone with 3 kids. The other end of the country, there's a lot going on. So that is strike 2. So I did it twice. But at least this time I knew where to go to pick myself up again. And that's when I had a more, that's where I had a more in-depth work ethic, I guess you could say, about how to attack all of this. So it became deeper and more honest the second time around, because there was no choice. There was literally no choice. My network was back at the other end of the country, so I was the sole provider for the kids. I couldn't just give them to my parents or something to take care of them. I had to be on my A game. So now when I didn't have a choice, I actually managed to do it. And I think that's what happens a lot of the time, is that people, they don't move until it hurts more to stay than it does to move. So that's my way into this. And finally, I got past that, and people were like, how did you do it? And how did you even do it twice? And I was like, I did this and this and that. I started helping people out. And eventually I got certified so I could do this for a living. And then it was a side hustle for many years until it became a full-time thing back in 2018.
Well, how's your experience as a productivity coach evolved and over all these years that you've been coaching?
It evolved a lot, because in the beginning, all you have to go by is, after I got certified, you have this framework you work. All you have to do is go by the framework. And in the beginning, you just copy paste your trainer or your coach or your teacher, because that's all you have, really. You have the framework and you have whatever they told you. So in the beginning, I didn't have my own style at all. And I don't think anybody does, because you need to develop that over time. And then I started working with some people, and some of them I loved and some of them I absolutely hated. And they might be a good fit for another coach, but they were not a good fit for me. And then you have to figure out, okay, what's more important when you build a company? You also need to find out what's more important, money or clients, or money or peace of mind, really. Because in the beginning, you have a tendency to say yes to everything with a pulse on a credit card. And you pay such a high price at the other end if that customer's not the right fit, because they're going to be unsatisfied. You're going to be unsatisfied. There's no wares here. And they go out and they might talk badly about your company or your competences because they don't feel they got what they were supposed to get. And you feel like they were impossible. So you want to go for ideal clients, but it takes a while to figure out what's an ideal client. What does that look like? You have to kiss a lot of frogs. And there's no shortcut. There's no quick fix. There's no one size fits all. You have to just go out there. And I think people in general, me included back then, not now, because now I know better, just be better at listening to your gut feeling, because it's always telling you the truth. And your head can say, oh, but I need the money. And your heart can say, yeah, but that guy's a deuce. So follow your heart, because the heart will always beat the brain. The heart is stronger all the time. And everybody knows this. Looking back, if you look back at, I don't know, a work relationship, a romantic relationship, somewhere where you've been longer than you should have. We've all done that. And you could reason with yourself why you just stay in the job, for the comfort, for the safety, for the money, for the whatever. But in your heart, you knew that this was not going to last. And eventually it didn't. So how long it takes you to realize that this is no longer working for me, the longer it takes, the bigger the pain. Might as well listen to the heart from the first go, and then find another way.
So what are like some of the core pillars of high performance?
Well, the book, the first book I wrote, If You Want Success, Be Happy, is actually based on those pillars and my own experience out in those 5 pillars. And one of them is clarity. That's the first one. So if you don't know, clarity is actually divided into your goal and your purpose. So the goal is, where are you? Where do you want to go? And the purpose is, who are you? Who do you want to become? And most people, they look at their goals and say, this is what I want to accomplish. And then they do nothing else. So they forget the other half of the clarity part. And they try to fit into their goal. So if you do it right, you find out your purpose first. So who do you want to become? And then you design your goal to match you. Because that's when you keep in balance and you keep fulfilled and satisfied. You never lose the connection to yourself. When you only go for the goal, the chances that you get disconnected is really, really great. And you don't want to do that, because you are then you're going to try to fit into your life. And there's so many interests out here. They all want a piece of you. And you get spread out so thin that you don't even know what's important anymore. So the first thing is, in clarity, is to find out, who do you want to become and why is this important? And then design the goal to match who you are as a person. And once you have your goal, it's kind of like building your life GPS, right? When you have your purpose, then you design your goal, and you take your goal, and it's like when you punch in an address in the GPS, that's a final destination. And then the GPS reverse engineer to figure out how you're going to get there. And you do the same in life, really. So you put in your goal and you reverse engineer and take a look at what obstacles might be on the way. Where could you get derouted? What do you need to learn to get support for, implement in order to get there? And all of that takes energy. So that is the second one. Second one is energy. Both energy is 3-parted. So you have emotional energy, physical energy, and mental energy. And of course, they all weaved in together. But if one of them crashes, chances are the 2 others are too. So you got to be aware of where in your energy are you running low, not just I'm low on energy. Okay, what kind of energy? Because when you know that, it's easier to fix it. So that's number 2 is the energy. You need the energy to fulfill on whatever plans you have. And the next one is courage. All changed courage. And so that's just getting out of your comfort zone. It takes courage. So you need to master the topic of courage if you want to get safely to your destination. And then you have productivity as a pillar. And productivity is not just getting stuff done. It's about getting the right stuff done. We get so distracted. We live in a modern world where everybody can reach us all the time. And we are expected to, we're not really, but we think we're expected to reply right away to text, phone calls, whatever. And I think in when we're talking about productivity, it's really important to protect your time and your energy for the things that actually move you forward. It's super easy to get lost in distractions and other people's agenda. And once you start following other people's agenda, you're in trouble because they don't have that many plans for you. So you will get left behind. So being productive is not about how much you do. It's about, are you doing the right thing? And how do you define that? And then put it into some sort of system. A lot of people don't like systems, but they're really helpful. So if you want to have more free time, optimize. And the last one is influence. You're not going to move anywhere without having people to support you. Like success is a team sport. So the importance of influence is to have, it's important because you need people back you up to support you. And if you don't have that in your current circle, then you need to go get it. Because you are the average of the 5 people you spent the most time with. So be aware that those people are not dragging you down, but they're actually lifting you up.
So now they work with like many coaches and leadership. What do you think is maybe like the missing piece that, executives are missing when it comes to leadership?
That they have to learn how to lead themselves first. Everybody knows that when you're on an airplane, if the mask drops, you have to put your own on before you put on anybody else. And that's because if you don't know how to help yourself, you can't help the others. And it's the same in life and in business and in anywhere, really. You need to take care of number one. And I think that's the big missing piece that nobody talks about. Everybody talks about strategies and ideas and how to get leads and all these practical things. But if your head is not with you, it doesn't matter how many strategies I give you. It's not going to work. So I think that the missing piece in most coaching is the fact that you have to work from the inside out. It's so much easier to work from the outside in and just take whatever is out here and try to make that work. Because nobody taught us how to deal with our own emotions. Nobody in school taught you how to communicate, how to deal with emotions, how to get out of a funk, all these things that are really humanly important. Nobody taught us. So that's why we go with everything out here, because then we can distance ourselves. Not because we don't want the other thing, just because we have no idea how to deal with it. And that's what happened to me back in 12. I didn't know how to deal with it. And some learn and some don't. And those who learn have a greater chance of living a life of both success and happiness. And those who don't have a great chance of being miserable. So I think the biggest missing piece is you have to work from the inside out. So you constantly aligned with your core values. You shouldn't have to turn yourself into a Pringle to fit into other people's world.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, why do you believe that some C-suite leaders, they often feel unfulfilled despite all their external success? That, it seems like they're from the outside working in, but they're really successful.
Yeah, that's back to disconnection and lack of clarity. Everything goes back to clarity. It doesn't matter how high up you are, everything goes back to clarity. And if usually for a C-suite, when they are unfulfilled and unhappy, even though they're on paper really, really successful, because the success doesn't fill them up anymore. Most of the time, because they are disconnected with themselves, so they're not connected to the success either. They don't see it as success. I can from my own experience, this is a good example. It's minor compared to the C-suite, but it's easy to understand. So when I was writing my book, The Happy CEO, that was my second book, I was doing so many interviews. I interviewed 142 CEOs from 14 countries, more than 500 hours of brutally raw conversation with these people. They were a huge help to putting together the book. And I did that throughout the entire 24. It was an entire year spent doing that. And to me, that was just one day at a time. That was just an interview, just interviews. Like, they mattered to me greatly, but the size of the project, I did not see that because I was in the trenches every day. So it's just little by little by little by little. And then one of my clients pointed out to me, do you have any idea how huge this is? And I was like, until he just said so, not really. I haven't thought of that. And that's just it. We forget to celebrate that in order to get that book out there, in order to create an entirely new coaching program for C-suite, I had to gain a lot of knowledge. That's a lot of hours of work in there. So it was a huge project, but because you're in there every day, you don't see it as much. So that's a good example of what happens when you have big successes, is that you've been in the trenches, you don't see it as a big success. It's just inevitable in some way because you've been working towards it for a long time. But people don't see all the work behind it. They just see the trophy, right? In this case, the book. So whatever the project might be, they just see the result. And for C-suite to reconnect, they need to find the deeper meaning. Usually, what happens with C-suite is that they are, per definition, there might be exceptions, there always is, but for the most part, they are insecure overachievers. And that might not sound good, but it is, because that's what brought them this far. They want to make sure that whatever they did was sufficient, so they went the extra mile every time. So that's the driver for the success. So when they start here and they have a boss here, if you want to go here, you need to do this. And they do this. And then the boss up here says, and so it goes up the ladder. And at some point, they're standing at the top and nobody guides them. And in the meantime, they've been so focused on doing it right and going the extra mile that they forgot everything on the sides. Everything in their life, their relationship, the passion, their fire, everything that got them started in the first place, because they've been focused on getting to the next level. So now they're standing up on the top and they have no idea what to lean against. And that's when this unfulfillment kicks in. And some get a coach, and some just start making bad decisions, or drink too much, or do drugs, or do extreme sports and jumping out of helicopters. I don't know. But they're trying to get that buzz that they used to get in their work life. And all of a sudden it's not there anymore because it's not their project anymore. They got disconnected along the way. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And it's interesting how people think. And you'll think that, like, a lot of C-suite people, they're so successful that they have so much self-confidence. You're saying, when you go to some of your research, that's not always the case.
No, it is not. They might look happy on the outside, but they're not. Oftentimes they're really not. And the thing is, they know they have everything on paper. So they go, okay, I have a beautiful wife. I have my trophy kids. I have my expensive car, my big mansion. I have everything. The company's doing great. So why am I not feeling happy? What the heck is wrong with me? So they turn it inward, right? And say, something must be wrong with me. And now they also feel really lonely because they can't share that with anybody. Because if they go to one of their friends and say, I'm telling you, I'm not happy, they go, what's wrong with you? And that just confirms what they say to themselves. And that just makes it even worse. And if they act unhappy around people, people will go say, What's the matter with you? And they can't answer because they don't. And I know that for a fact. I was there too. I didn't have an answer, which just makes it even more frustrating. That you don't even know why you're not happy. That sucks.
So how do you help a leader shift from like short-term thinking to like long-term?
Can you repeat the question, please?
How do you help leaders shift from like short-term like performance to like long-term thinking? Like, building like their legacy.
I do that by we're kind of stepping back from the success. We take the business part out of the equation, at least for a while, and we concentrate on, if it were you, we concentrate on Daniel. So we put Daniel back in focus. So now you need to learn how to focus on Daniel, which is something we're taught not to do. Because we're taught if you're thinking about yourself, you're being an ass. So you need to think about everything and everybody before it comes to you. And by the time you get through this list, there is no room, resources, or time for you. And we just learn to live with that. But the thing is that being egocentric is not about being a dude. It's about, it just means to center yourself. So what it really means is just being in balance. And you need to go there. So that's the first thing I do is I take them out of their life, per se, and then tell them, now we need to focus on you. So we go out of your life and into your body and say, how do you feel? Like really feel? And in the beginning, a lot of them say, yeah, well, and then when they have to answer a question, they go back to work and work relate that question. And I've pulled them back in and say, it's not about work, it's about you. So how do you feel about this? And it takes some getting used to them. But when they do, and they start feeling their own feelings, they start feeling their body, they get better to listening to how they feel and how they're physically held up. And it gives them a new perspective. And then once they kind of get that lockdown, so they accepted the fact that it's not thinking about themselves, taking care of themselves, leading themselves first. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And if they want to be the best leader to others, and I don't care if it's a CEO of Coca-Cola or if it's a stay-at-home mom, because we're all leading somebody. And everybody is a role model to somebody else. It's mandatory. So it doesn't matter who you're leading or how many you're leading. It's the same structure, it's the same system. If you don't know how to lead yourself, you can't be expected to lead anybody else. So for those who are leading large companies and they don't know how to lead themselves, they put a huge pressure on themselves to fulfill a role that they are essentially not capable of. Of course, they can be good bosses. It's not like that, but they could become even better leaders if they knew how to lead themselves first. So once they learn that, they get their feeling of freedom back. So that's what happens once they learn that. Once they learn to take care of themselves and prioritize themselves and be okay with that, that's when liberation comes up. That's when liberation happens. And now they can lead and live and love and serve from a completely different perspective. And that's what creates legacy.
Many times people talking about in the corporate world, like there's a lot of burnout. It's a common struggle that a lot of executives face. Like, how does your coaching and programs help with the clients to claim like their energy and prevent like total breakdown?
Yeah, well, burnout comes. I'm gonna. This is gonna be a repetition of before, really, because burnout, everything that is not good comes from the same thing. It comes from like clarity, like a purpose, like a meaningful pursuit. That's what creates the burnout. And when they feel confused or unfulfilled, when they have this feeling of unfulfillment, loneliness, sadness, however it shows up for people is very different, but it all leads to the same thing, that they can't find the meaning of what they're doing anymore. So meaningfulness on its own is not especially helpful in this situation. You need to have something to pursue. These leadership leaders, the type of human beings leaders are, or they're hunters. They want to keep moving, right? So they need something to hunt for. They need a pursuit, but that pursuit needs to be meaningful. And in order to prevent burnout, you need to be clear on this and on what I just said before about the clarity, about putting yourself into the center of your own world, not being a jerk, but just being aware that you serve a place in your own life. You deserve to be happy, and sacrificing yourself for others is not noble. It's just flat out stupid. Because once you do that and you have that burnout, and I did get that, I suffer. Yeah, sure I did. But you know who suffered even more? The ones I love the most. Kids. And that's the reality. So once you burn out, you cannot be who you want to be for the people that matters the most. And if it's a company, you cannot be the leader the company need. And if you're on sick leave, you're not going to be able to help anybody do anything. So taking care of yourself is really, really, really important. It's a necessity. It really is. But we're not raised to believe that it's okay. We're raised to believe that, and you don't do that, then you're not a good person. That's what we're taught.
So what inspired you to write, if you want success, be happy? Well,
My story was the inspiration for that book, because I went from a total bust mess to success in both life and career. And that's when I found that it actually is possible to have both success and happiness without having to sacrifice one for the other. It really is possible if you do it the right way. And I figured that I've been through that, and there's a lot of people out there who's been through a lot worse than me, for sure. But that doesn't really matter, because the tactics are the same. But finding out that you can actually have the best of both worlds was a big eye opener for me. And I figured somebody could learn from my mistake, because I made a lot of them. Some of them I made more than once. So my stories in that book, and some of the situations I've been in and what I learned from them, is in that book. So it is based on how you can get both, but you need to start by being happy, because there's no way that, happiness starts it all. And if you are a happy person and you have energy and joy in your life, you attract a different kind of people. And you attract different kind of opportunities, because all of a sudden you're not just hiding out in the corner looking sad, but whenever you're smiling and energetic, people notice, and they become curious to what you have to say, what you're doing, stuff like that. And so you don't have to be a coach to be happy. You can be a tech nerd and be happy. And people will listen to what you have to say about your job if they can feel like there's two things that people always attracted to. It's the smile and enthusiasm. So that's why I wrote the first book, was to help others maybe do some shortcuts. They can definitely cut some corners by reading that book, learning from my mistakes. And I am giving in the book, in both books, I'm giving a workbook along with the book, where they can do their own work, fill out some questionnaires, different things that put things in perspective for them. So it's not just a good story. They can actually use this to transform if they want to.
what's at least one transformation you hope the readers of your book yet after reading applying some of the teachings?
Well, that would be very individual, I think, for each reader, what they get out of it. But the idea is to, overall, the mission is to create more happy people. Because I believe that happier people are more loving people in town. Because you're open to the world. And if you can love yourself, it's easier to love others, and it's easier to let others love you back. And love conquers all. So a happier, more loving world is, I think we need that, don't we? We need more happiness in the world right now. I think everybody can agree on that. Ultimately, the goal is to create a world of more happiness. But it starts with the individual. So whoever reads this book and comes out at the other end a happier person, then I succeeded. And if 10 people reach it and only one get that out of it, it's still worth it. Because as long as one person benefits, it was worth the effort. Then it wasn't for nothing. So it's about making a difference.
What advice can you give to people who feel stuck in life? Like they either may be a hot mess or they don't know their purpose. Is there any advice you give to people like that? In terms of
What?
I mean,
That is reading. It's hard to give specific advice because it's very individual. What is the struggle really? Because people can feel stuck in a bad marriage. They can feel stuck within themselves. They can feel stuck in not being able to have the kids do their homework. There's so many different ways of stuck that it's hard to give a simple advice, but that fits all scenarios. But start with clarity. Take a look at what matters. Where am I? Where do I want to go? Who am I? Who do I want to become? And it is simple, but it's really, really hard. So it's a simple exercise, but it's really hard to do because we're not used to thinking in those ways. And that's where the book can actually help, because there's a lot of questions in there. And let's say for instance, you have 5 questions. 3 of them might resonate with you and the 2 others doesn't make sense. Well, that's because those 2 that doesn't make sense, you already got that covered. That's not an issue for you. But the 3 others might make you reflect on things, think about things differently. But to get clarity about what matters most is definitely step 1 every time. But it's hard to guide people on how to specifically do that when I don't know the situation. But they can Google it. They can Google clarity. And they can come up with all kinds of stuff. The thing that is important is nothing of what I do that is rocket science. You can Google anything. Everything you can Google, maybe except for the book, because it's brand new and it's still not got caught by Google and ChatGPT. But otherwise, you can Google anything. The thing is, most of the time, you don't know what to look for. If you don't know the problem, how do you look for a solution? I feel sad. That's not specific enough to come up with a specific solution.
now, some people think that, they want to solve all their life issues or their corporate issues on their own. Or is it now you have things like, Google, ChatGPT. At what point should people consider like hiring a coach versus trying to figure things out on their own?
When they get stuck. That's pretty simple. You can go a long way on your own. But at some point, you will get stuck and you will plateau. And you will do that because you can only develop yourself within the frame of your current knowledge. And to get out of your comfort zone, you need somebody who have more knowledge or different angles than you do to ask you different questions. So to reach the next level, you will have to have somebody from the outside and asking questions that you could not possibly ask yourself because you don't have the current knowledge to do. So every time you want to reach the next level, it's always a good idea. And then you can have a coach or a trainer or a mentor or a best friend, whatever you choose to do, but somebody else. And you can talk to them and they can pull you out of your comfort zone by pushing you, cheering you on, asking questions, stuff like that. And then you can work within that framework for a while until you hit the glass ceiling again. Then it's time to get yet more knowledge. So being a happy person is not something that is just over and done with. Of course, when you have the basics in place, it's a lot easier, but it's a constant education. I get educated every day and I get challenged and I get inspired by others every single day. So growing as a human being is something you can do throughout your entire life. And I recommend people do that because that's what makes them feel alive and not just surviving.
Can you walk us through like your 4 levels of the coaching framework? You have the core, the charge, the declaration, and the leadership.
Yes, and then I have the new signature program called the Happy CEO Coaching Program. And but you always need to have the basics locked in. So whatever you do, you need to have the 5 pillars I talked about earlier. You need to master those before you move on to anything else. Because this is about getting your own stuff in place and figuring your own stuff out and be the best version of yourself. And then you can take on the world and then you can expand from there. But you need to you need to get to know yourself again. Like we do when we're kids and we're just very, let's go. The kids have a different different perspective on life and the world. They're not afraid of making mistakes. If they were, none of us would learn how to ride a bike. So they keep doing until they're succeeding. They keep trying to walk until they succeed at walking. And we need to put some of that into our adult minds that failure is part of the process. Very few people are extraordinarily good at something the first time they try. So just keep trying to get better, but you cannot start out being good if you haven't tried to be bad. Nobody starts out at the top. So that's why I think that the foundational pillars need to be locked in before you even think about inside the Happy CEO is part of the program. So it's first quarter of the program is about locking this in. But in the other 4 levels, it's a level entirely by itself to get these things locked in. And then you can move on to the next level if you want to. Nobody have to. They're not connected as such. They're separate. So you can do whatever you have, but you need to go through the core to enter the other 3 levels.
How do you integrate your evidence-based research with your coaching approach?
I take everything I learned from my clients and from the interviews for the book, and I have a really good memory. Now that's a gift. I can remember almost anything. So when somebody told me something during an interview, and I have a client who is stuck in whatever situation, and I can recall, oh, this guy said he did this. And I'd tell this client, the current client, I say, you know what? I talked to a guy, he did this. Could that be helpful for you? If it's about strategy, how to attack things, sometimes it's just, I think everything we learn in our life, we apply it wherever we can, when it makes sense. And I don't think it's something we think about a whole lot. It's just something that we do. If it's locked in within us, it's a knowledge we have, and we will share it to help others any time of the day. Very few people decide to take all the knowledge and keep it to themselves. Most people use their knowledge to help others, making a difference in their job, in their connections, in their social life, whatever.
I mean, you talk a lot about like having the balance as being like really important, but for some people that may be stuck in the job that they really hate, or they're working, a lot of hours, like 60 to 80 hours, in the week, or they're stuck in their bad marriage. It seems like balance is such a far fetch, far away, almost like dream. Like it's like out of reach. Is it really feasible for people to live a balanced life if their current situation is, seems like it's really out of whack, where like it's people are just like almost like suffering that they're not happy in their current situation.
Yeah. The thing is that when people are in that place, they have a tendency to believing that it's actually not possible for things to be any other way. We are brought up to believe that success takes sacrificing. You have to sacrifice if you want to be successful. And that is just a load of BS. It's really not true. Success is not a hassle and a hustle, and you don't have to sacrifice your joy and your happiness and your marriage to be successful. Well, that's a load of BS. But the thing is that people have been quote unquote programmed by the world, by teachers, the school system, parents, everything, been programmed to believe that is the truth. But who does that truth belong to? Nobody can really say that. So the thing is, they don't believe that they can get both. And it takes some persuasion skills to have them accept that it is very possible. It's not even that hard. It really is. It's minor adjustments. But if you overwork and you sacrifice yourself to do the job, well, let's take a look at what does your day look like. And let's free up some hours every day that you can spend on doing the things that matters the most with the people that matters the most. So it's about taking a step out, taking a step backwards and say, okay, what does my life contain of? What do I have in my life right now that I don't appreciate? Sometimes I have my clients do an anti-pro list because they might not know exactly what they want, but they sure as heck know what they don't want. It's always easy to say, I don't want this and this and that. And usually I would say you cannot order don't, but sometimes it's the only way. If people are so locked in, this is how it has to be, and they don't think it can change, then we start with that and say, okay, so what do you currently have in your life right now that you hate, that is draining your energy, that is sidetracking you, that is distracting you, whatever. And then write a list from that. And then say, how can I get that out of my life? Or how can I flip it to be something that is positive? So that's a really good place to start if you're stuck in that situation where you don't believe it can become any better.
Can we share a client success story or two, like how it illustrates your coaching success?
Can you say it again? You kind of fell out a little bit.
All right. Can you share one of your client success stories of how they had transformation using your coaching program?
Yes, I can take this one. This example is from some years back. I had a client who was out of Europe, but was based in Denmark temporarily as a branch manager for a Canadian company. The Canadian company also had headquarters in Europe, but the main headquarters was in Canada. And he was totally stressed out. And we did different things to make his day be shorter so he could free up some hours because there was a lot of distraction. So we had to systemize his day a little bit. And one of the things we did was we said, you do not look at your email apart from between 9 and 10 in the morning and 2 and 3 in the afternoon. So he had 2 hours a day where he could open his email and respond to the world. Because that's what it really is. The email is just a really good organizing system for other people's agenda. So that's so we said you can only do that twice a day. And what happened is it freed up a lot of mental pressure and a lot of time, because going back and forth to things takes a lot of brain power, and you have to kind of start over all the time. If you're sitting there doing a presentation and you get interrupted by the email, when you go back to the presentation, you kind of have to start over, and it takes somewhere between 2 and 10 minutes to get back on track, depending on how complex it is. So he saved a lot of time with that. What happened after only a few days, the European headquarters reached out to him and said, what the heck are you doing? And he said, I'm doing the job you hired me to do. And they said, yeah, but you're not answering my email. And he said, I am, but not until this afternoon. And they said, why? And he told them why. And they said, okay, that sounds like a really cool plan. Let's do that for the rest of Europe. So they did that. And then the Canadian headquarters called the European headquarters and said, what are you doing? Why are you not answering our email? And they told them why. And it's, oh, that's a great idea. That will free up so much time for our employees. Let's do that worldwide. So they implemented this as a global thing out of one session with one client. And they could actually see it on the bottom line, because a lot of time was given free for people to do what they were actually they're supposed to do, and not just to responding to the world. So it created a mental break for the employees, because they were more clarity and more joy and less confusion, less distraction. So that's a really good example of a client case where a little thing becomes a huge thing.
Wow, that's really amazing. I know you mentioned that clients often describe feeling more seen and more important working with you. Why do you believe, you're able to create this deep client, connection with people?
About being real. I think that for me to create those connections, they need to know that I get them and that I care. I think it doesn't matter what you sell. If people don't feel like you get them, and if people don't feel like you care, you can't pretend to care. You have to really care. Because if you only pretend to care, people will pick up on that. You're going to slip along the way. You can only keep it up for that long. So you need to really care about what you do and the people you interact with, and you need to understand them. And if you don't understand them, that's cool too, but then you have to be willing to listen long enough until you do. And sometimes there's a client I don't get, and not a specific one, but there can be a specific situation where I don't get where they're coming from. And then I have to ask, say, okay, where's this coming from? I need to understand how this is happening. And then be willing to listen, not to reply, but to understand. So be present in the moment and be willing to understand the other party. And just listen for understanding. I think that is what that is what create deep connection, is that you're willing to listen, not to reply, but to understand. And then just be real. Just if things suck, say things suck. It's not that hard. Everybody's tried it. Sometimes a client might say, you don't understand. And I'll go, you must have the biggest ego in the world to think that you're the only person ever suffered this. Because nobody is ever the only person in the world to whatever. there were thousands before me and thousands after me who's going to, millions or billions before me and after me who's going to experience the same thing. We're not that unique. So if something is not right, just say it's not right. You don't have to keep up the facade. It's not the same as you have to go out and pour your heart out to everyone, but you can be honest. And if you're having an off day, everybody does. Just say to people, I have an off day, and they will leave you alone and they will understand. And if you're not saying something, they're going to pick at you for not being who you usually are. But just understand that being human is not a weakness, it's an asset. And happiness is not a trophy at the end of something. It's actually a strategy. Happiness is a strategy for success. It's not the price you win after being successful.
I think you're one of maybe the only one, maybe two people that actually talks about happiness as a strategy. I mean, that's very thought-provoking to me, because a lot of people, they're always very performance focused, like on the numbers and the numbers. How do I make more money? How do I make, the company expand and grow? But I very rarely hear anybody talk about happiness, like throwing happiness into all of that mix. So I think you definitely have a great perspective about that. I think that's well needed, in my opinion. And we shouldn't just look at numbers.
Me too, and that's why we need more. We need more focus on happiness, and it's something that you can always be happy, right? People have this very arrogant relationship with happiness, and it's always at the end of something. When I get that raise, then I will. When I get that project lead, then I will. When I get that client, then I will. Why don't you just start being happy now? Because we always go for someday. But there's only 7 days in a week, and someday is not one of them. Some days never come. Because we keep pushing it in front of us. And then we finally get that client, and people around you go, oh, now you have that client. Now can we go to Disney World? No, because you know what? Someday I just need this. And we keep searching for the next milestone, and we never finish. And we're not supposed to do that. We're just supposed to enjoy the ride, the entire ride. I mean, life, happiness, joy is not a destination. The destination is 6 feet under. You don't want to rush there. So you have to enjoy the ride. You only get one go around. So enjoy the ride and enjoy everything that happens, all the good things that happens, big and small. Celebrate them all. Choose to put joy and happiness in your life, and actually use happiness as a business strategy, because it works.
What's one piece of advice which every ambitious leader would hear and take to heart?
Take yourself seriously. That's the core. That's the core of everything. That's the core message for ambitious leaders. Is man up and take yourself just as seriously as you take everybody else. That's a tall order, and it's not something they're used to, but it usually lands really well with them. And it doesn't apply only to leaders. It applies to absolutely everybody, because we are so hard on ourselves, and we judge ourselves really bad. Talk to ourselves in a way we would never talk to our friends and our kids or anybody else for that. So we always judge ourselves at a ridiculous parameter. We judge ourselves by a parameter that we would never judge others by. So start taking yourself as seriously as you do everybody else. If you respect other people's boundaries, start respecting your own. If you respect other people's time and value, start articulating and respecting your own.
So if somebody had a question about a conversation today or were interested in working with you, what are the best ways to get in touch with you?
I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. And otherwise, go to my website, book a call. There's a calendar in there. You can go book a call that works for your time zone, because that's the reality of today.
Do you have any final thoughts like to share with the audience before we wrap up our podcast for today?
Just go out, live, lead, and create your legacy. That's it. Just go out there, be happy, and bring the confetti. Not literally, but well, you can if you have confetti in your pocket.
Well, I'm very interested in learning more about your book. I'm going to get a copy myself about the Happy CEO because I'm very curious as for all that hundreds of hours of research, what information and details you have in there. So I'm definitely going to check out that book. It sounds really interesting. And probably for me, in this conversation, you have a lot of breadth of knowledge. You're not just like a surface level coach. So, and some people are just like, some people be happy. You have a tremendous amount of experience and wisdom. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing all this knowledge and experience with our audience today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you inviting me. I'm really honored to be here. And I hope that a lot of people get something out of this conversation that can inspire them to live their own life and be more happy.